The first shot in the war for Lake Tannin Ridge was fired, not with a bang, but with the polite, excruciatingly slow creak of a clipboard hinge. It was Saturday, October 2nd, a day of crystalline autumn air and the scent of sawdust. Miles Rennick was halfway through unloading a stack of pressure-treated lumber from his truck bed when the delegation arrived. They didn't cross his property line. They were far too meticulous for that. They stopped precisely where the manicured turf of the Willow Hills common area met the wilder, unkempt grass of his own acreage. At the lead was Patrice Van Doren, president of the Willow Hills Homeowners Association. She was a woman sculpted from compressed propriety and expensive hairspray, her face a mask of serene, unassailable pleasantness. Beside her stood a nervous, balding man in a polo shirt emblazoned with the Willow Hills logo, a stylized willow tree weeping over a perfect circle of water. He held the clipboard like a shield. "Mr. Rennick," Patrice began, her voice as smooth and cool as the surface of the lake behind him. "Good morning." Miles straightened up, wiping a sliver of wood from his palm. He was a tall man, lean from a life of discipline rather than exercise, his face etched with the quiet focus of his 30-year career as a civil engineer. "Morning, Patrice." "Bob." Bob, the clipboard man, gave a weak nod. "Miles." "We couldn't help but notice you're beginning a project," Patrice said, gesturing vaguely toward the lumber. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a separate, purely muscular function. "We just wanted to touch base. As you know, any new structure visible from the common areas requires prior approval from the Architectural Control Committee." Miles felt a familiar, low-frequency hum of irritation begin in his chest. He'd spent his life designing systems that followed immutable laws of physics and logic. This was something else entirely. "Bob, I appreciate the heads up. But as we've discussed, this property isn't part of Willow Hills. My dock is being built on my land, extending over my water." Bob fumbled with his clipboard, flipping through pages. "Well, yes, technically. But Section 7.3 of the Willow Hills Covenants, conditions, and restrictions pertains to structures affecting community aesthetics. Your dock. It will be quite visible from the community walking path." From across the street, a curtain twitched in a pristine colonial window. Mrs. Gable was watching. Further down, Mr. Henderson had paused his lawn mowing, his hand resting on the handle. An unsubtle observer. Miles was on stage, a specimen under the microscope of suburban scrutiny. The planned humiliation was palpable. "I see," Miles said, his voice even. He refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. "Could you do me a favor? Bob, could you send me a formal letter, citing that specific bylaw and explaining how it grants your ACC jurisdiction over a private, non-member property? I'd like to have it for my records." Bob's eyes darted to Patrice. The pleasant mask tightened a fraction of a millimeter. "Of course. A written request is standard procedure. We just thought a friendly, neighborly chat would be a better way to start." "I agree," Miles said, leaning against his truck. "Neighborly chats are great. Procedural requests, however, should be in writing. It avoids any misunderstandings." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken threats. Patrice's smile became a brittle. "Painted thing? Very well. Mr. Rennick, we are simply trying to protect the property values and the harmonious aesthetic that all our residents cherish. We'll be in touch." She turned with the sharp precision of a drill sergeant, Bob scurrying in her wake. Miles watched them go, the murmur of their conversation lost to the breeze. The audience in the windows retreated. The lawnmower sputtered back to life. He was alone again, with his lumber and the quiet lapping of the lake. But the peace of his sanctuary had been breached. And he knew. with the certainty of an engineer calculating a stress load, that the clipboard was just the beginning. This was a test of his foundation. Miles Rennick's sanctuary had been earned. For 3 decades. He had been a ghost in the machine of municipal infrastructure, a senior civil engineer for the Tri-County Flood Control District. He'd spent his life designing culverts, levees, and storm drains, the vast, unsexy circulatory system that kept civilization from drowning in its own runoff. It was a career of immense responsibility and zero public recognition. No one sent thank you cards for a sewer system that worked perfectly. They only noticed when it failed. After the Great Deluge of 18, when a 100-year storm slammed the region, and his painstakingly designed overflow basin saved the entire downtown district from becoming a permanent water feature, he'd received a plaque and a firm handshake from the mayor. The next day, he'd submitted his retirement papers. He was 51, and he was done with thankless work. He bought the Tannin Ridge property at a chaotic foreclosure auction. It was an anomaly, a geographic hiccup, an 8-acre parcel that included a small, run-down house and the entirety of the 20-acre lake it sat on. The previous owner, a failed resort developer from the 80s, had consolidated all the lake and surrounding land parcels into one deed. When his empire crumbled, the entire lot house, land, and lakebed went up for sale as a single, indivisible unit. It was his perfect escape, a place governed only by the seasons and the laws of thermodynamics. He spent the first 6 months simply existing there, watching the sun rise over the water, identifying the local bird species, and slowly, methodically, planning the modest wooden dock that would be the centerpiece of his quiet retirement. That evening, after the confrontation, he sat in his home office, a room of Spartan neatness. Blueprints for the dock lay on his drafting table, each measurement precise to a 1/16 of an inch. He picked up the phone and dialed. Leah Rennick, a crisp voice answered on the first ring. "Hey, sis, it's started." His sister, Leah, was a partner at a downtown law firm specializing in corporate litigation. She was as pragmatic and unyielding as the contracts she drafted. Define it. Miles recounted the morning's encounter, the polite language barely concealing the territorial aggression. They're citing an aesthetics clause in their CC&Rs to control construction on my property. He could hear the faint sound of typing as she spoke. Of course. They are. Nuisance and aesthetics clauses are the pocket aces of every power-tripping HOA board. They're deliberately vague, so they can be selectively enforced. Miles, listen to me very carefully. You are correct on the law. But that doesn't matter to them. This isn't a legal dispute yet. It's a war of attrition. They will try to wear you down with notices, meetings, and social pressure until you either give in or make a mistake. So what do I do? You do what you do best. You become more methodical, more precise, and more patient than they are. From this moment on, you document everything, every conversation, every letter, every interaction, date, time, subject, who was present. You communicate with them only in writing, preferably via certified mail. You will be polite, professional, and you will never, ever lose your temper. They want you to get angry. An angry man looks unreasonable. A calm man with a file folder full of evidence looks powerful. Following her advice, Miles found the governing documents for the Willow Hills Homeowners Association online. They were a masterpiece of bureaucratic density. 100 pages of rules governing everything from mailbox color to the permissible height of lawn gnomes. He found the section Patrice's man had cited. Rugger 7.3 Structures affecting community aesthetics. No structure, including but not limited to fences, sheds, or other outbuildings, shall be erected on any lot which is visible from the common area, and which, in the sole discretion of the Architectural Control Committee, is deemed to be inharmonious with the overall aesthetic standards of the community. He read it again. It was exactly as Leah had predicted. A weapon forged from vagueness. He highlighted the entire section in yellow. This was the battlefield. They're hanging their entire argument on the phrase, "on any lot," Leah said over the phone an hour later, having reviewed the PDF he'd sent her. Their argument, however flimsy, will be that the visual lot of the community is impacted by your dock. It's absurd, but it's just enough of a legal hook for them to start the process. They're betting you'll find it easier to submit the plans than to fight. They're betting wrong, Miles said, his voice quiet. He looked out his window at the placid, dark surface of the lake. His lake. He had spent his life building things to protect communities. He wouldn't let a committee of bullies destroy his own. The first formal letter arrived 5 days later, on Thursday, October 7th. It wasn't dropped in his mailbox. It was delivered by a mail carrier who required a signature. Certified mail. The envelope was thick, embossed with the Willow Hills HOA logo. Miles signed the slip, a knot of cold resolve tightening in his stomach. This was the official start. No more neighborly chats. This was a documented procedural attack. Inside, on heavy bond paper, was a courtesy notice of potential violation. The language was a masterclass in passive aggression, polite on the surface, but underscored with the rigid spine of authority. Dear Mr. Rennick, this letter serves as a friendly reminder regarding the commencement of construction on your property adjacent to the Willow Hills community. As discussed during our informal conversation on October 2nd, the Willow Hills Architectural Control Committee (ACC) is tasked with maintaining the aesthetic harmony and property values of our neighborhood for the benefit of all residents. Pursuant to the Willow Hills CC&Rs. Article 7. Section 7.3. All structures visible from the common area must receive prior approval from the ACC. While we understand your property is not a member lot, the significant visual impact of the proposed dock structure on the community's primary water feature, a key selling point for all homes in our association, triggers the oversight responsibilities of the committee. To resolve this matter amicably, we request that you immediately cease all construction activities and submit 2 sets of detailed plans for your proposed dock to the ACC for review no later than October 15th, 2021. This will allow us to work together to find a solution that respects both your desires and the established standards of the community. Failure to comply will result in the matter being escalated to a formal violation hearing before the Board of Directors. Sincerely, the Willow Hills HOA Board of Directors. Miles read it 3 times. The audacity was breathtaking. They referred to his private lake as the community's primary water feature. They were attempting to annex his property through sheer force of prose. He scanned the letter and emailed it to Leah. Her reply came in less than 10 minutes. Textbook. They've established a paper trail and given you a deadline. Now we establish ours. For the next 2 hours, with Leah guiding him on the phone, Miles composed his response. It was concise, professional, and legally precise. He cited his legal ownership of Lot 42 Tannin Ridge, including the riparian rights to the entirety of the lake. He respectfully pointed out that Section 7.3 of their CC&Rs applied explicitly to any lot within the Willow Hills development, a legal definition his property did not meet. He stated that while he appreciated their commitment to aesthetics, their governing documents did not grant them extraterritorial jurisdiction. He concluded by stating that construction on his private property would continue as planned, and that he now considered this specific matter closed. He attached 2 documents to his letter, a certified copy of his property deed, with the parcel, including the lake, clearly outlined, and a recent survey map confirming his property lines. He printed it, signed it, and drove to the post office. He sent it via certified mail. Return receipt requested. As the clerk stamped the green card, Miles felt a sense of grim satisfaction. He had followed the rules of engagement. The ball was back in their court. Patrice's court, it turned out, operated under its own set of rules. The second certified letter arrived on Thursday, October 14th. It was a formal notice of violation and summons to hearing. His meticulously crafted legal response had been dismissed in a single, condescending paragraph. While the board acknowledges receipt of your correspondence and attached documents, our legal counsel has affirmed the ACC's standing in matters of significant aesthetic impact to the community, regardless of property lines. Your refusal to submit plans for review constitutes a continuing violation. He was summoned to appear before the Willow Hills Board of Directors on the evening of Thursday, October 21st, at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse, to show cause why a daily fine should not be levied. It's a kangaroo court, Miles. Leah warned him over the phone that night. The verdict has already been decided. This hearing isn't for you. It's for them. It's a performance to legitimize the actions they've already decided to take. Go anyway. Be calm. Be professional. And present your case. Let them be the ones on record acting unreasonably. We need their overreach documented. On the evening of the 21st, Miles walked into the Willow Hills clubhouse. The room was sterile and smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner. A long folding table sat at the front, behind which sat the 5-member board, Patrice, in the center, flanked by Bob with his ever-present clipboard, and 3 other residents who wore expressions ranging from bored to vaguely hostile. There was no audience. Miles had prepared a binder, a smaller version of the one he'd later give to the sheriff in an imagined future confrontation. It had color-coded tabs for his deed, the survey, his correspondence, and a printed copy of their own CC&Rs, with Section 7.3 highlighted. Mr. Rennick. Thank you for coming, Patrice said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty room. This is a hearing to discuss the ongoing violation at your property. You have been given notice to cease construction and submit plans for your dock. You have refused. You have 10 minutes to present your case. Miles stood and calmly walked them through his evidence. He spoke not with passion, but with the unassailable logic of an engineer. He explained property law in its simplest terms. He showed them the map. He pointed to the specific wording in their own governing document. They listened with feigned patience. When he finished, Patrice smiled her serene, infuriating smile. Thank you, Mr. Rennick. We appreciate your perspective, she said. However, the board must consider the broader implications. Dozens of our residents have their life savings invested in homes whose value is directly tied to the pristine, unobstructed views of the lake. Your private property rights do not give you the right to diminish the value of theirs. Your dock is an unapproved, jarring element. Bob chimed in. The covenants are clear. The ACC has sole discretion in matters of aesthetic harmony. But that discretion applies to lots within your association, Miles countered, keeping his voice level. My property is not one of those lots. Patrice held up a hand. That is your interpretation. Our counsel advises us otherwise. The board will now vote. It was a sham, executed with brutal efficiency. Patrice called for a motion to find Mr. Rennick in violation of Section 7.3 for failure to submit plans for an unapproved structure. Bob motioned. One of the other members seconded. All in favor, Patrice asked. 5 hands went up. The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Rennick, you are hereby ordered to halt construction and remove the existing pilings within 7 days. A fine of $100 per day will be assessed against you, retroactive to today's date, until the violation is cured. You will receive official notification by mail. This hearing is adjourned. She banged a small wooden gavel on the table. It was over. He had presented facts, law, and logic. They had countered with feelings, interpretations, and power. The system wasn't just broken, it was designed to be this way. The stakes were no longer just about a dock. They were financial, and he had just lost the first battle. The fines began to accumulate with the cruel, dispassionate regularity of a metronome. Every day, a new letter arrived in his mailbox, a formal, computer-generated invoice from the Willow Hills HOA's management company. Violation. GAR 7.3. Unapproved structure. Daily fine, 100 ZRs. Amount due, 100 ZRs. The next day, amount due, 200 ZRs. The day after, 300 ZRs. Miles filed each one neatly in a new folder labeled illegitimate fines. By the end of October, the stack was an inch thick, the total exceeding $1,000. He knew he couldn't just ignore it. The HOA's power was civil, but it was real. Unpaid fines, however illegitimate, could eventually lead to a lien. He had to fight back, but on his own terms. It was time for a counter-investigation. He began with a formal, written request, again sent via certified mail, for access to the association's records, as was his right under state statutes for matters affecting his property. He requested the last 3 years of board meeting minutes, detailed financial statements, and a current list of all board members and their roles. The response was telling. They sent him a package a week later, but it was a masterwork of obstruction. The meeting minutes were heavily redacted. Entire pages were blacked out with the justification, executive session, pending litigation. The financial statements were high-level summaries, lacking the detailed breakdowns he had requested. One line item caught his eye: Lake Maintenance and Improvement Fund. Annual expense, $24,000. It was an absurdly round number. And it begged the question, how could they be spending money to maintain a lake they didn't own? Frustrated, Miles took his search to the digital trenches of local community forums and social media groups. He posted a carefully worded, anonymous query about obtaining unredacted HOA documents in Willow Hills. Within an hour, he received a private message. You're not the first person to run into Patrice's stone wall. If you want to talk, meet me at the Daily Grind coffee shop tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be the one reading the Wall Street Journal. The message was signed simply, S. The next day, Miles found S in a corner booth. She was a woman in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She folded her newspaper as he approached. You must be the guy with the dock, she said, her voice dry. I'm Sandra Kowalski, retired forensic accountant. Lived in Willow Hills for 15 years. Been fighting Patrice on financial transparency for the last 5. Over coffee, Sandra painted a picture of Patrice's reign. She had consolidated power, installing loyalists on the board and ACC, and used the HOA's management company as a shield, letting them handle the unpleasant business of enforcement while she remained above the fray. She treats the HOA like her personal fiefdom, Sandra explained. And that lake maintenance fund is her pet project. For years, she's been collecting a special assessment from every homeowner, claiming it's for things like water quality testing, algae control, and shoreline cleanup. Except, as you now know, they have no authority to do any of that. So where is the money going? Miles asked. Sandra slid a slim manila folder across the table. I have my suspicions. 2 years ago, before Patrice had the old management company fired and replaced with the current one. I managed to get a full, unredacted set of financials. Look at the vendor payments from that fund. Miles opened the folder. The payments weren't to landscaping companies or environmental labs. They were to entities like Van Doren Consulting Services and for community engagement events that coincided with Patrice's lavish holiday parties. It was a slush fund. "This is my smoking gun," Sandra said, tapping the folder. "But she's buried everything since then behind redactions and lawyer speak. I'm just one resident. She dismisses me as a crank. But you're an outsider. You have a different kind of leverage. You have the truth about the lake itself." They agreed to work together. Sandra would help him navigate the labyrinth of HOA finances, and he would be the public face of the challenge. The one person Patrice couldn't dismiss with an internal bylaw. As he drove home, Miles felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer just his fight. He had an ally. He also had a new, powerful piece of evidence. The battle wasn't just about a dock anymore. It was about exposing a fraud. The puzzle was taking shape. But Miles felt a critical piece was still missing. Patrice's obsession with his property felt too venomous, too personal to be solely about aesthetic control, or even a slush fund. The ferocity of her attack suggested a deeper motive. To find it, he decided to dig into the history of the property itself. On a chilly Tuesday in early November, he drove to the county recorder's office, a drab government building filled with the scent of old paper and the quiet hum of microfilm readers. He spent hours tracing the chain of title for his land, parcel by parcel. Back through the decades, he finally arrived at the record for the foreclosure auction held 18 months prior. The file contained a list of all parties who had officially registered to bid. He scanned the names of few investment companies, a handful of private individuals, and then he saw it. The entry stopped him cold. Bidder, Number 7. Van Doren Family Trust. Trustee, Patrice M. Van Doren. The clerk helped him pull the auction summary. It listed the final sale price, his price, and the name of the second highest bidder, the underbidder. It was the Van Doren Family Trust. She hadn't just wanted to control the view of the lake. She had wanted to own it. He hadn't just built a home next to her kingdom. He had bought the kingdom itself right out from under her. Her entire campaign of harassment, the notices, the hearing, the fines wasn't a matter of policy. It was the bitter, protracted revenge of a thwarted monarch. This changed everything. Her actions weren't just an abuse of power. They were tainted by a massive, undisclosed conflict of interest. Energized by the discovery, Miles had another idea. While at the county office, he had a fleeting thought. HOAs are legal entities, corporations of a sort. They must be registered with the state. On a hunch, he navigated to the Secretary of State's online business entity search portal. He typed in Willow Hills Homeowners Association, Inc. The result appeared on the screen, and his breath caught in his throat. Entity name, Willow Hills Homeowners Association, Inc. Entity type, nonprofit corporation. Date of incorporation, June 12, 1994. Status administratively dissolved. He clicked for details. The status had been changed on August 15th of the current year. The reason, failure to file annual report and pay required fee. For 3 months, the Willow Hills HOA, as a legal corporate entity, had ceased to exist. Every action taken since that date, every violation notice sent, every hearing held, every fine levied by Patrice and her board had been done without the legal authority of the corporation they purported to represent. They weren't just a rogue board. They were a legally defunct one. He printed the page, his hands trembling slightly. This was more than a smoking gun. This was the silver bullet. He had her on personal motive, financial malfeasance. And now, a fundamental lack of legal standing. He finally had everything he needed to dismantle her entire operation. The letter that arrived on Friday, November 12th, was the heaviest yet, both in the thickness of its paper stock and the weight of its implication. It wasn't from the HOA or its management company. It was from the law firm of Sharp, Connolly and Vance, the HOA's legal counsel. The letterhead was embossed, the language stripped of all neighborly pretense. It was cold, hard, and terrifyingly official. Notice of intent to file lie-in. Dear Mr. Rennick, this firm represents the Willow Hills Homeowners Association. Please be advised that you are currently delinquent in the amount of $3,100, representing unpaid fines for the continuing violation of CC&R Paragraph 7.3, plus accrued interest and legal fees. You have failed to cure the violation or remit payment despite multiple notices. Therefore, pursuant to the association's governing documents and state law, this letter serves as formal notice of our intent to file a lien against your property. Lot 42, Tannin Ridge. If the full amount is not paid within 30 days of the date of this letter, upon filing, this lie-in will constitute a legal encumbrance on your property title, which may affect your credit and your ability to sell or refinance the property. The association will also be entitled to foreclose on the lien to satisfy the debt. Govern yourself accordingly. Miles read the words foreclose on the lien, and a wave of icy dread washed over him. This was the ultimate threat. They were threatening to take his home, his sanctuary, over a dock they had no right to regulate in the first place. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left him speechless. He immediately called Leah, his voice tight with a mixture of rage and fear. He read the letter aloud. "This is their nuclear option," she said, her tone grim. "It's a scare tactic, but it's a real one. Fighting a lien in court is incredibly expensive and time-consuming. They're betting you'll pay the $3,000 just to make it go away. That's how they win. They make the cost of fighting higher than the cost of surrendering." This was his lowest point. For all the evidence he had gathered, the conflict of interest, the slush fund, the dissolved corporate status, none of it mattered in the face of this immediate, legal threat. He could be right and still lose, buried under a mountain of legal bills. He paced his office, the carefully organized folders on his desk suddenly feeling flimsy and inadequate. The war of attrition Leah had warned him about was entering its most brutal phase. The next day, the mail brought a brightly colored flyer announcing the Willow Hills HOA annual meeting, to be held on Tuesday, November 30th. It was a mandatory meeting for all homeowners to vote on the next year's budget and elect new board members. At the bottom of the agenda was a small but crucial item: homeowner open forum 3-minute limit per speaker. A new path opened in his mind. A courtroom battle would take months and a fortune. But a public forum, in front of the very people whose money Patrice was spending to harass him, was another matter entirely. He had a deadline and a venue. He had exactly 3 minutes to plead his case, not to a judge, but to the court of public opinion. He picked up the phone to call Sandra. It was time to prepare for the final battle. The Willow Hills Community Center on the evening of November 30th buzzed with the low-grade tension of a mandatory school assembly. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and suburban discontent. Over 100 residents filled the folding chairs, clutching copies of the proposed budget. At the front table sat Patrice and her board, alongside a tight-lipped representative from the management company, a woman named Ms. Davies, who looked as if she'd rather be anywhere else. Miles sat in the back row, a slim laptop bag at his feet. He had registered to speak that afternoon. His name was fourth on the list for the open forum. Sandra gave him a subtle, encouraging nod from across the room. The meeting dragged on with excruciating slowness. Patrice presented the budget with practiced ease, glossing over a 5% increase in annual dues by pointing to rising insurance costs and a new line item for enhanced legal counsel. Finally, after an hour, she announced, "We will now move to the homeowner open forum. As a reminder, each speaker is limited to 3 minutes to ensure everyone has a chance to be heard. We will use the timer." On the large projector screen behind her, the image of the budget spreadsheet was replaced by a stark, digital countdown clock, 3:00. First speaker, Mrs. Gable, Lot 12. Mrs. Gable complained about dog waste. The clock ran out. Next, Mr. Henderson, Lot 27. Mr. Henderson complained about the dying petunias at the front entrance. The clock ran out. The third speaker questioned the legal fees. Patrice gave a smooth, non-answer about protecting the association from frivolous challenges. Then, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly, she said, "Next on the list is Mr. Miles Rennick." A murmur went through the room. Heads turned. Miles walked to the podium at the front, his heart hammering against his ribs, not with fear, but with a cold, focused surge of adrenaline. He placed a single USB drive on the podium and looked at the tech running the laptop. "Could you please open the file named Tannin Ridge?" Patrice's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Rennick, this forum is for homeowners. You are not a member." "I'm an interested party who has been billed over $3,000 by this association," Miles said calmly. "I believe that gives me standing. My 3 minutes, please." Ms. Davies from the management company gave a slight nod. It was better to let him speak than cause a scene. The first slide of his presentation appeared on the screen. It was a high-resolution satellite image of the neighborhood. The timer started. 3:00, 2:59, 2:58. "Good evening," Miles began, his voice steady and clear. "My name is Miles Rennick. For those of you who don't know me, I am your neighbor, the one with the dock. I'm here tonight because your board has been fining me $100 a day for building this dock on my own private property." The next slide appeared a crystal-clear copy of his deed, with the lake and his land outlined in red. "This is my deed. This next document is the official plat map from the county recorder's office. As you can see, I own the lake, all of it. The legal basis for the fines is Section 7.3 of your CC&Rs, which this board claims gives them authority over my land. Legally, it does not. But this isn't just about a dock. It's about your money." The next slide showed 2 columns. On the left was the redacted budget summary he had received. On the right was the unredacted version Sandra had provided from 2 years prior. He used a laser pointer to highlight the Lake Maintenance Fund. "For years, every one of you has been paying into a fund to maintain a lake the HOA has never owned. I asked for a detailed accounting of this fund. This is what I was given." He clicked, showing the redacted pages. But an unredacted copy shows where some of that money has gone. Another click. Invoices to Van Doren Consulting appeared on screen. The murmur in the room grew louder. I couldn't understand why the board, and Ms. Van Doren in particular, would go to such lengths. So I looked into the history of my property. The slide changed to a copy of the public auction record. His name was at the top as the buyer. He pointed the laser at the next name down. The underbidder, the Van Doren Family Trust. This was never about community aesthetics. This was a personal vendetta, funded by your dues, against the person who outbid her for this lake. Gasps rippled through the audience. All eyes flew to Patrice. Her serene mask was gone, shattered. Her face was pale, her mouth a thin, white line. She looked small, exposed, and utterly humiliated. Finally, I questioned the legal standing of the board to take any of these actions at all. The final slide slammed onto the screen. It was a screenshot from the Secretary of State's website. The words blazed in official, damning text: status administratively dissolved. As of August 15th, the Willow Hills HOA Corporation ceased to legally exist. Every fine, every letter, every threat of a lien issued since that date has been done without legal authority. The timer showed 5 seconds left. Miles looked out at the sea of shocked faces. He saw Harold, the man from the paddleboat patrol, looking pale and terrified. In his pocket was his surveyor's report. His final, devastating piece of evidence: the discovery of a forgotten public access easement on the far side of the HOA, illegally fenced off by Patrice's board years ago to increase their exclusivity. A revelation that would hurt everyone's property values. He met Harold's gaze. In that split second, he made a choice. He could punish them all, or he could stick to the point. He chose the latter. His integrity was worth more than total victory. I simply ask the homeowners of Willow Hills to demand that their board follow the law, he said, his voice ringing with clarity as the timer hit 0:00. The timer's final beep was swallowed by a tidal wave of noise. The sterile, quiet room erupted into chaos. A low murmur rippled through the room, growing into a chorus of residents turning to their neighbors, whispering questions that grew louder with each passing second, until the entire room was a cacophony of angry, confused voices. What does he mean? Dissolved. She used our money to do what? A slush fund, I knew it. Patrice sat frozen at the table, her face a blank mask of shock. The carefully constructed world she ruled had been publicly and systematically demolished in exactly 180 seconds. Before she could even attempt to respond, Sandra Kowalski stood up, her voice cutting through the din with the sharp authority of a seasoned accountant. I make a motion for a vote of no confidence in the current board president, Patrice Van Doren. Seconded, shouted at least a dozen people at once. And I make a subsequent motion, Sandra continued, her voice gaining strength, for an immediate, independent forensic audit of this association's finances for the past 5 years, to be conducted by an outside firm with no connection to this board or its management company. The room roared its approval. All eyes turned to Ms. Davies, the representative from the management company. She saw the impending legal nightmare: a defunct corporation issuing fines, a board president with an undisclosed conflict of interest, and clear evidence of financial mismanagement. Her professional survival instinct took over. She stood and tapped the microphone, her expression a careful mixture of concern and decisiveness. Given the serious allegations presented here tonight, which our company was not previously aware of, she lied smoothly. We believe it is in the best interest of the community to table the budget vote. We will cooperate fully with the homeowners to establish an interim board and facilitate a comprehensive, independent audit. We recommend the board accept President Van Doren's immediate resignation. She looked directly at Patrice, her gaze leaving no room for argument. It was over. The management company was cutting her loose, saving itself. Patrice's jaw tightened, but she gave a single, jerky nod. The fight had gone out of her. A motion was made from the floor to establish a 5-person interim board. Sandra was nominated and accepted immediately. Hands shot up all over the room with volunteers. Within 15 minutes, a new governing body was in place. Their first act was to unanimously pass a motion. All pending violations, fines, and legal actions initiated against Mr. Miles Rennick are hereby declared null and void, and are formally rescinded, effective immediately. The residents of Willow Hills broke into spontaneous applause. It wasn't just for Miles. It was for themselves, for the reclamation of their community, from the quiet tyranny of one woman's ego. In the weeks that followed, the audit revealed the full extent of Patrice's mismanagement. The Lake Maintenance Fund had indeed been her personal slush fund, and she was eventually forced into a settlement to repay a significant portion of the misappropriated money. Her social standing in the community evaporated overnight. She sold her house 6 months later and moved away, a quiet, ignominious retreat. The new interim board, led by the unflappable Sandra, worked diligently to restore order and transparency. The HOA's corporate status was reinstated. The bylaws were reviewed for clarity, and a new era of common-sense governance began. Miles finished his dock. It was a simple, elegant structure, built with the precision and care he applied to everything in his life. He spent his days on the lake, paddling his canoe in the quiet mornings. The peace of his sanctuary finally, truly restored. He could have stopped there. He had won. But he recognized an opportunity, not for victory, but for peace. At the first official meeting of the newly elected board, he once again signed up to speak. When he approached the podium, the room fell silent. But this time, it was a silence of respect, not suspicion. Instead of demands or complaints, he made a proposal. I would like to offer a formal access agreement to the Willow Hills Homeowners Association, he announced. I propose to license a designated 50-yard stretch of my beach and the adjacent water for the exclusive use of Willow Hills residents and their guests. A quiet gasp went through the room. The rules would be simple, he continued. Respect the property, no loud music, and use is at your own risk. In return, I ask for a single, nominal licensing fee from the association, $1 per year, per household, but with one condition. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The entire sum collected annually must be placed into a new, dedicated, and transparently managed fund. A fund to be used for one purpose only: to purchase and maintain new playground equipment for the children of this community. The board and the residents were stunned into silence, then broke into a wave of heartfelt applause. It was a gesture of profound goodwill, an act that transformed him from the adversarial outsider into a true community partner. The board voted unanimously to accept his offer. A month later, a small, tasteful sign was installed near the newly accessible beach. It detailed the rules of use, and, at the bottom, it designated the source of the future playground funding. It read, "This community improvement is made possible by a partnership with the Tannin Ridge Community Fund." Miles had not become their overlord. He had become their neighbor.